President Trump would face if he tried to fire Attorney General Jeff Sessions. With us tonight, two lawyers here to discuss the latest twists in this Russia story and what they could mean legally for the president and those around him. Peter Zeidenberg, former federal prosecutor at Justice and a deputy special counsel in the Scooter Libby case during Bush 43, and Jeremy Bash, back with us, former chief of staff at CIA and DOD and former chief counsel for House Intel. Peter, it was your quote in the aforementioned Washington Post piece last night that led to us wanting to invite you on the broadcast tonight, and here it is. The thing that really strikes me about this is the stupidity of involving the president. They are still treating this like a family-run business, and they have a PR problem. What they don't seem to understand is this is a criminal investigation involving all of them. So in lay terms, Peter, how did the president put himself in greater legal jeopardy or in legal jeopardy at all by getting involved in a statement for his son, Donald Jr., about a meeting that took place?
Well, there's a reason why defense attorneys universally tell their clients not to speak about the case with anyone else involved in the case. And, I mean, that's a universal edict that all lawyers tell their clients. And the reason for that is that if a prosecutor finds out that subjects of an investigation are speaking to one another, it immediately makes their antenna go up, and they immediately become very suspicious that there is coaching going on, and that is basically obstruction of justice if they're fashioning a story, if they're getting their story straight. And that is why that whole episode is just, it's mind-boggling to think that this was allowed to happen. There's a reason why people have lawyers, and the reason is lawyers do that. The lawyers can communicate properly and legally with one another, but when principals have these conversations and the lawyers are involved, those conversations aren't privileged. And everybody on that Air Force One that day coming back from the G20 is going to be interviewed by the special counsel. He's going to get the manifest from Air Force One, find out who was on the plane, and find out who was involved in these discussions. Then they're going to get all the calls to Air Force One are monitored, and there's a record of every call that goes in, so they'll know what numbers were called. They'll get the emails. Everybody involved in that whole episode is going to have to get interviewed, and there's going to be a suspicion that this is an attempt for them to basically coach a story out, and the question will be why.
Jeremy, I have to say this because it's in the realm of the possible. It is not impossible that there were summer associates or interns at law firms of lawyers representing members of the Trump family who may have heard a conference call, who could have heard the president's voice from Air Force One, who could have been contemporaneously aware of what was going on in the drafting of this statement. It might have seemed like an ordinary day, but of course, viewed in light of the Mueller investigation, where do you think the Mueller investigation is, and what happens to such a large effort when something like this comes along?
Brian, it merits repetition. That meeting back in June 2016 was direct evidence that the Trump campaign knew in advance, before attending that meeting, that the Russian government was attempting to interfere in the 2016 election. And by participating in that meeting at the highest levels of the Trump campaign, that is leading Mueller to look at whether there was foreknowledge that the campaign willingly participated and, in fact, agreed to attend that meeting and agreed to discuss the interference. I think for the president then to lie about it just shows that he's covering his tracks. And the fact that adoptions were discussed at that meeting doesn't render his explanation truthful. As we all know, 99% of the truth is 100% a lie.
Peter, a subset of what you were just talking about discussing a case is the custom of, as we talked about at the top of this broadcast, walling off the president. The pejorative for it is plausible deniability. Call it whatever you want, but a protective barrier so the president's not in the know.
I mean, that's like 101. I mean, I think back to the Bush administration when we were doing the leak investigation. President Bush was completely walled off. He did not have conversations with Karl Rove or with Scooter Libby or with Dick Cheney asking them for details on what the investigation is going on and who's doing what and what's happening. Because if he did have those conversations, then he would be becoming a witness to the to that, and it would just unnecessarily complicate lives for everyone concerned. They're doing the exact opposite here. President Trump is involving himself directly. Everybody who has conversations with him are brought into it, and as is he. And he's bringing himself right into the middle of it, and it appears, and certainly from a prosecutor's standpoint, and remember, this is all in the context, at least in my mind, of the Comey firing, which smacks of obstruction of justice, is they're looking as a piece of a puzzle. In and of itself, putting out a false statement to the press is not illegal, but it helps a prosecutor weave a narrative of a story that the government does, that the Trump administration does not want to get out, and it helps explain a lot of their conduct.
And Jeremy, about Jay Sekulow, who is now hanging out there having made an assertion that is wrong, is it possible an attorney spoke to the media without talking to his client?
It sounded like to me he was making it up. Like he didn't actually check the facts. I think if he had checked the facts and he had been given the facts, he would have said nothing, or he would have dodged it. It sounded like he was just offering spin. And as an officer of the court, as someone who's supposed to represent before courts and the court of public opinion the truth and the whole truth, I think he really did himself and his client a huge disservice by not telling the truth.
Gentlemen, this really helped us lay folks understand the law as it pertains to this story. Thank you both so very much for joining us for this conversation.